Be that guy. Not the one who makes excuses. Not the one who waits for permission. Be the one who decides it's time. Time to lead, time to grind, time to rise. Be the guy who wakes up when others are sleeping, who trains when others are tired, who builds while others break. The guy who doesn't need a crowd to be committed, who doesn't need motivation to be disciplined, who doesn't wait for opportunities, he creates them. Be that guy. The one who shows up not just for others, but for himself. The guy who keeps promises to himself, who doesn't fold under pressure, but rises through it. Be the guy who's consistent when no one is watching, who works in silence but whose results speak loud. Be the guy who chooses standards over shortcuts, who walks the talk, who lives with intention. Because being that guy doesn't mean being perfect, it means being relentless. It means being hungry when others are full. It means getting back up every time life knocks you down. Be the guy who controls his emotions, who leads with clarity, who speaks less and delivers more. The guy who's not chasing applause, he's chasing greatness. Not chasing fame, he's chasing mastery. Be the guy with vision, with discipline, with fire in his chest and purpose in his steps. Because the world has enough average, enough followers, enough people waiting for a sign. Be the guy who becomes the sign. Be the reason someone else decides not to quit. Be the proof that hard work still matters. Be that guy who shows up early, who stays late, who doesn't need to be told what to do. He just does it. The guy who doesn't need validation, his results validate him. His life is the proof. Be the guy who's humble enough to listen but strong enough to lead, who owns his flaws but never stops improving. Be the guy who doesn't run from pain, who uses it, who turns setbacks into comebacks. Be that guy who others count on, not question, who raises the bar just by walking in the room, who leads by example, not by words. The guy who lives by principle, who doesn't cut corners, who doesn't compromise his character. Be the guy who builds in private what will shine in public, who plants seeds today, knowing the harvest takes time. Be the guy who's underestimated, and then over-delivers, who's doubted, and then dominates. Because being that guy doesn't happen by chance, it happens by choice. Every morning, every rep, every sacrifice. So when life gets hard, good! Be that guy who pushes harder when it gets lonely. Good! Be that guy who keeps walking when it gets messy. Good! Be that guy who keeps building. Be the guy who doesn't need a title to lead. Be the guy who doesn't need a platform to make an impact. Be that guy! Be that guy! Because the world needs fewer talkers and more doers, fewer complainers and more creators, fewer spectators and more warriors. Be that guy! The one who looks in the mirror and sees purpose, sees potential, sees a fighter. No cape, no spot, no hype, just fire, just focus, just a man on a mission. Be that guy, because that guy changes everything.